I'm Melisa Idris, and you're watching The Brand, the show about advertising, how it works and how it works on us. Today, I have joining me on the show Scott Rigby, who is the Head of Digital Transformation for Asia Pacific for Adobe. Now, you're here to talk a little bit about the Adobe Experience Index, which is a survey that Adobe releases every year. This is the second year globally.
That's great. But
it's the first year that you've included a breakdown of data from the APAC region, right?
That's right.
So let's start there, Scott. Let's talk a little bit about the Adobe Experience Index. What does it actually aim to reveal?
So, as you alluded to, this is the second year that we've run the survey, and this year it includes 8,000 respondents from across the globe. 1,000 of those are from Southeast Asia. And really an intention here is to understand the impact of customer experience on brands. So is customer experience and the expectation around it growing? Is it decreasing? What does that look like from a demographic perspective? So do different ages have different expectations around experience?
Right.
And then lastly, what does that look like from an industry perspective? So is there a higher expectation? Are the industries living up to those expectations across some of the key industries?
So, I mean, my common sense would say that customers' expectations will always increase, right? So why do brands need to pay attention to this? And I'm taking it that brands should be paying attention to this, right? Okay.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I think over pretty much, say, the last decade, we've seen really the transition of customer experience from product and price. That's not really the area that customers focus on anymore. It's the experience they have with your brand that's become really important. And in addition to this survey, we did another survey with Forrester last year, and that really looked at what is the impact for brands that are customer experience focused. And we had a number of different criteria across that, and across pretty much every single metric, from when you acquire a customer, they become aware of your brand and product, through to them considering your product, through to purchasing or applying if it's a credit card.
Right. The
through
whole
to
process.
Retention. Every single area, those that were what we call leaders in that area around customer experience were out indexing those that weren't. And not even in respect of just customer experience, also internally. So you had better employee satisfaction, you had better team satisfaction. And so customer
really
experience is really important to businesses.
Absolutely. That's really interesting to me, that it used to be about price and product, but now it's about the experience, right?
Absolutely.
It resonates with me as well. So let's talk a little bit about the findings of the survey. What did it tell you? What was kind of the central message that you got from the findings?
Well, I think some of the key messages, particularly for Southeast Asia, there's really two areas that were quite interesting out of the data. So first was the age demographic. And you know, if we think about, say, 50 plus, and we think, well, look, just in respect of customer experience, you would think that they're not quite as demanding as some of the younger generation, particularly millennials.
Right.
But what we found is that the 18 to 34 age demographic were less likely to have as high a customer experience expectation for brands as those that were 50 plus.
Wow.
So the 50 plus are actually much more demanding. They're not the instant gratification generation that we tend to tag millennials with. The second area of insight that we found really interesting was that when it came to that sort of older, younger generation gap again, was that the 50 plus were more likely to complain when they had a bad experience directly to the brand.
Okay.
The younger generation was more likely to tell their family, friends, colleagues about the bad experience, and obviously impact the brand through kind of that mechanism.
Right, that's really interesting. So the age demographics or something. But you know, when you talk about customer experience, right, what makes for a frustrated customer, Scott? I mean, what constitutes bad customer experience?
Look, I think there's lots of there's lots of examples, unfortunately. Look, everything from, say, fragmentation. So, you know, we all have multiple devices today. It's a known fact. You know, most of us have probably 2 or 3, if not multiple devices that we engage brands through. Right. So if I think about myself, I have my mobile phone, I have a tablet, I have a laptop device. And you know, I might start my research with the brand. I might be thinking about travel. I might start on my commute in the morning to look at a particular destination, let's say Phuket, for you know, on my commute in the morning on my mobile phone, and then suddenly I have time again at lunch I jump on my work laptop, and I want to have continuity of that experience. And quite often, brands don't allow for continuity of that experience. So they might have decided on a place, they might have researched a number of different options. The customer wants to continue that conversation off with your brand where they last engaged you, not start at the beginning again, right? So that's a great example. Another one might be as they transition between, say, digital, online to offline. So maybe they've done some research, maybe they're a banking customer of yours. They're looking at home loans and quite a complex product to buy. And so they do the research on the website, and then suddenly they might call your call center for further advice. And there's the disconnection between the call center technology and, say, the web technology don't talk to each other. And therefore that knowledge about that customer and their research, they have to repeat themselves again.
And that would be very frustrating. I'm just wondering, so those are kind of the ways that consumers expect technology to help their lives, especially in dealing with brands. But I'm thinking, say for instance, my personal experience would be if I'm shopping online, retail, right? And I have a bad customer experience. Something goes wrong with the website. I'm inputting data multiple times. What happens is I leave my cart. I will just abandon the cart and go do something else.
That's right.
So I'm thinking brands should be very cognizant of the way customers respond to bad customer experience.
Without a doubt. And certainly in the survey, it showed that 40% of Southeast Asian customers will leave a brand and go and buy from another brand if they have a bad experience.
Oh, wow.
And so it
40%.
absolutely has a significant revenue impact to your business if you don't understand some of those friction points as part of the customer journey and you're not resolving that experience for your customers, it's going to have an absolute impact, both from a revenue perspective, but also just word of mouth. And there's lots of research to say, and the millennials are kind of bearing that out by actually telling others about it, right?
So which is more dangerous? I mean, I'm wondering, for brands, you have the older generation who will come back to the brand and say, I was unhappy with the service here. But millennials will tell everyone on social media. Of course. And brands have to be worried about that.
Well, then you have to obviously look at social media, make sure you're monitoring it and looking for some of those negative sentiment words that are being used in conjunction with your brand, and then trying to understand what was that friction point or dropout point for the customer, and then work to resolve it. Find some of those biggest areas that are a bottleneck for customers to interact, and obviously we talked about convenience previously, is how do you make it really convenient and resolve some of those issues, and look at the biggest areas that are creating an impact for your customers and work in them first.
All right, we're going to come back and continue this conversation right here on The Brand. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Brand. I have Scott Rigby from Adobe here with me. He's the head of digital transformation for Asia Pacific. And we're talking about the Adobe Experience Index, which is a survey put out to measure the expectations of customers in the digital economy. So talk to me a little bit about this, the technology interaction opinions. One of the findings from the survey was that consumers in Southeast Asia are actually quite happy to have automated interactions, completely automated interactions. Is it because we don't like people anymore?
Well, it's not that, from a Southeast Asian perspective, they don't like people. I think they, if anything, technology adoption is pretty widespread within Southeast Asia, and they understand that there's a convenience that comes along with that. And it's not to say that Southeast Asian customers don't want sort of the face-to-face or hand-holding. They're just be more willing to accept it. And if it makes their lives more convenient and helps them, deliver, get a service or buy a product, they're more willing to adopt it.
It's quicker and more convenient,
and more convenient, and we're all trying to save time in our own lives. And if automation can make that happen, then certainly we're willing to adopt it more readily.
One of the things, Scott, that struck me from the findings of this survey was the kind of balance that brands need to take between providing personalized service and also automated interaction. So if customers in Southeast Asia are open to fully automated interactions, but yet expect a certain level of personal service, how on earth would a brand navigate that?
And certainly I think technology and Adobe Experience Cloud is one of those technologies, a platform that allows brands to be able to interact with customers and provide kind of that automated convenience and personalization that you're talking to. So, you know, as simple as you might be a new customer exploring a new brand and a new product. And we can start to personalize the experience with very little information. So it doesn't require a lot, right, to get started. As an example, if you're an Android user versus an Apple user, we know that generally Apple users tend to have a higher discretionary spend. And so we might target more premium type products to you because you simply are coming on an Apple device.
Okay.
And we're already starting to personalize the experience for you. And as soon as we start to collect, you know, additional information about maybe you looked at certain types of products or you looked at certain types of holidays, we can start to then personalize more of that experience for you to the point where you might then sign up for the brand, or maybe you're thinking about test driving a car and we now have your contact details, we understand possibly some demographic information, we can start to get very tailored in our personalization, and all of that is automated through the technology platform.
Right, so the interaction is still fully automated,
Correct.
which provides the convenience and the speed that customers are looking for.
Correct.
But there's an element of, hey, I know you, I know
Yeah.
what your needs are and what you want.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, you know, it's the balance between convenience and the trade-off between convenience and the need for privacy.
Correct.
So how should we be looking at that? Because that was, you know, that is something that consumers expect
Correct.
from, you know, digital interactions.
And we talk about that as sort of know and respect me. So
know and respect me.
So we want, as customers, and you know, research is showing this, that customers were willing to share even more data than they do today,
Right.
if you can provide as a brand more personalized experiences. But at the same point in time, respect the data that I provide you, respect how you use that, who you share it with, make sure that you obviously have the right governance processes around that. Use technology like Adobe Experience platform that has security built into it to be able to drive the level of personalization and convenience that I need, but at the same time protecting my data and using it to make my experience better, not the business better.
Okay, well, let's talk about it from industry verticals, for instance. How are these experiences, I guess, looked at from different industries? How are each of these industries faring? Maybe walk us through some of the different industry verticals.
Yeah, look, we looked at a couple of key industries. We looked at, for instance, finance, we looked at retail, we looked at travel, and we looked at media and entertainment. And, you know, certainly when travel is one of those areas that has kind of always been a leader, and part of that is just, you know, early adoption in the travel industry and a lot of digitally born businesses, and so travel businesses had to kind of compete. You know, what I would classify as probably a fast follower would be sort of the finance industry, and particularly retail banking is one of those areas that we're seeing in a Malaysia context as well as Southeast Asia, making significant investments now to be able to provide not just the ability to apply for a credit card online or a home loan online, where previously you might have had to go into the branch to complete the paperwork, but you're also getting services. So maybe you know, my wife might be, you know, going on maternity leave. I might want to sort of delay some of my mortgage payments, and that used to be a service you had to call up for. Well, now they're digitizing it, right? And so they're providing more of these digital interactions. And, you know, certainly the expectation is we've seen it kind of increase within financial services. I think Southeast Asia still has some way to go and a lot of opportunity to leapfrog the rest of the world. And then one of the areas that's probably dragging a little is really sort of media and entertainment.
Really? In what way?
Which is not great for you, sitting within the media and entertainment business. But yeah, I think, look, and part of that is just media and entertainment is trying to understand what the new world is for this industry. And it's being disrupted by a number of different, you know, I guess, digital-born startups. There's a lot of sort of, you know, publications, there's sort of broadcasts, etc., that's being started up with, you know, minimal investment that are starting to eat away, as well as our time is simply being eaten away between, you know, the likes of YouTube or any other.
It's getting so competitive
so they're so competitive and media companies are still trying to work out what the new world looks like for them. And I think, you know, part of that is just, you know, making the investment, delivering the digital capability, looking at who's best in class, not just within your own industry, but also say, what is travel doing? If they're leading, what are some of the what are some of the case studies we can learn from?
Yeah, and adopt those practices within the industry. That's very true. You know, when I was reading the findings of the survey, I thought some of the terminology that you used, the phrases that you used, were really quite interesting. I sat down and I thought about, so what is a digital customer's expectations? What are her digital needs? And some of the things that, you know, you talked about, know me and respect me, that's really about knowing me and providing a certain personalized service. There's also delight me at every turn, which is an interesting way of saying I want to be surprised with my digital interactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with brands.
But it's not just digital interactions, it might be offline interactions. It's simply about maybe informing that. So if we talked about digital interactions as an example, maybe I've come to your site and I've looked for my travel holiday, and the next time I come back to your site, you show me an offer. Say, look, if you travel, you know, 2 days later, you could actually get this holiday for 10% less, just because the airfares happen to be cheaper. Or maybe you're going to offer an incentive as part of that, and so that's just delighting you. Part of it might simply be that, you know, if I come into your store, so maybe I've looked at products, is then knowing me when I come in store, we're then shortening the sales cycle. So possibly I looked at a couple of mobile handsets that I'm interested in, maybe some of the new Samsung or new iPhones that happen to be out. And when I come in store, the sales assistant happens to know a bit about my interaction so far, and we can then continue the conversation off there, right? And that's just delighting the customer at every turn, right? And or maybe you've known me for a while. You know, I have a preference to sort of buy ski clothing because I go to Japan every time this time of year. Is to send me a special offer that's personalized for me, right? And just delighting the customer and thinking ahead of where they're actually going in their customer journey with your brand, and you know, putting some of these delightful interactions in place.
Well, that's how you score the brownie points with the customer. We're going to come back right here on The Brand. Stay with us after these messages. Welcome back to The Brand. I'm Melisa Idris. I've got Scott Rigby here with me from Adobe. He's the head of transformation for Asia Pacific. Now, we've been talking about the findings of the Adobe Experience Index. What does it mean, Scott, for brands? I mean, paying attention to the findings, what would be some of Adobe's recommendations for brands to adopt and make sure that they are ready to manage the expectations, manage and meet expectations of the customer?
Yeah, look, one of the areas that we looked into was technology, and again, you know, us being a technology company, we talk about sort of technology being transparent to the customer. And, you know, part of that is really how do you get technology to talk to each other in the back end so that, you know, when your customer moves, say, from one channel to the next, that they don't have kind of these breakpoints. So if I look at, you know, the banking example I gave before, and, you know, OCBC is a great customer of ours within this region, and how they use that might be, you know, looking at that home loan, and then suddenly you call up the call center and the call center has no idea who you are or what you've done up to that point. And that's a great example of a breakpoint. So it is really thinking about, you know, what we call technology as a platform, making kind of these investments where technology is integrated. So I see something interesting happening in my campaign from a brand perspective. I want to create an audience off that, and I want to talk to this interesting new audience. And if you have different technologies from different technology providers, that ability to then use that audience segment to now send a message to, whether it be email or a personalized message or an ad on, say, you know, your network as an example, might be challenging if you're using multiple different technologies. And so that's one area where you look at platform investments, and certainly we've seen in other research that we've done that Asia Pacific is actually making these platform investments. They learned from the West. The West kind of tried to stitch together a whole bunch of different technology, didn't really work, and now they're making a platform investment because it's integrated already. You can deliver more campaigns to market rather than having all these resources trying to hold the technology together.
So having the technology be able to talk to each other is really important. This kind of seamless communication is important for the customer. Now, you know, we talked a little bit about that trade-off between convenience and also privacy, right? So that was part of the know me and respect me. Now, based on, I guess, your work and not just these findings, but, you know, talking to people within the industry, I'm wondering whether there's this sort of crisis of confidence that's emerging within the digital economy, particularly because consumers are trying to grapple with the fact that they want the convenience, but they're also having to give up a lot of personal data.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about whether you see this trust deficit and what brands can do to address it.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, certainly there have been a couple of incidents in the last couple of years, particularly with some social media companies and the like, which has really put trust at the forefront. You know, from certainly from a technology perspective, and what Adobe is doing within Adobe Experience Cloud is we're wrapping some of those regulations into our technology so that we can help guide brands when you're putting campaigns into market to make sure that you are meeting the rules on using what we call PII, which is personally identifiable information. And so we're certainly trying to put some level of governance in place from a brand perspective. Obviously, there still is some level of requirement within the organization. This is another area that tends to be a gap, is that organizations are grappling with obviously the evolution of digital themselves, and particularly if you're a legacy business, you've been around for 100 years or something like that, 50 years even, it's a new world, and you have to have a new governance structure in place, you have to have steering committees in place, you need to have people, processes in place that ensure the trust of that data and how it's used, and it's clearly communicated through the organization.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a challenge for brands. I mean, particularly if consumers are, have this trust deficit. And also, I guess there's a slight fear of tech when it comes to what this could mean for the future, not just in their personal lives, the daily interactions, but also job security, the changing nature of work. Has Adobe looked at issues like that?
I think, the evolution of say, jobs as an example, I think, internally within organizations, there is, businesses are having to look at what are the new skills, what are the new roles, what's the new organizational structure, how do I wrap this business around, say, what we call new ways of working. We're seeing some businesses, particularly in Australia, adopt sort of agile, not just in the technology function, but in the actual front end of the business, the marketing function, the customer experience function. And hopefully that gives that business a much more customer-centric viewpoint. There is sort of a lobbyist then for the customer and what the customer, how they might want to be interacted, what data they might want used to deliver what types of personalization. And I think, certainly that's one area that we've seen other parts of APAC adopt more readily. I think there's an opportunity there for Southeast Asian brands to start to think about what does that mean for their own businesses and what does the future organizational structure wrapped with this customer centricity look like.
It really is important to kind of invest in the right technology. All right, so in the last few minutes that we have left, Scott, I'd like to talk about your main takeaway. So brands watching this, thinking about the customer, putting the customer first, what should they remember? What should they take away based on the findings from the Adobe Experience Index?
Yeah, I think probably three things. First and foremost, if customer experience is not sort of being talked about in the leadership function of your business and is not the top thing that's being talked about, then you absolutely need to start the lobby and make sure that the leadership does that because it has a financial impact to your business. Two is looking at some of the data that's come from it, which is sort of the demographic age data that we talked about, is making sure you have the ability to be able to personalize for those different ages in the channels they want to communicate. If they have bad experiences, make sure that you're providing an opportunity for them to be able to feed that back, whether it be through social media, whether it be directly to your brand. And then probably lastly is really look at what does best in class look like, and OCBC was one. Malaysia Airlines is another great example, a customer of ours that's kind of adopting technology where the technology is kind of operating transparently in the background, and really the organization's focused on delivering more personalized experiences to customers rather than trying to hold the technology together.
Okay, so look around the industry and see what's working for them and try and adopt those best practices. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining me on the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
You've been watching The Brand. I'm Melisa Idris, and I'm going to be back with you same time next week, so I'll catch you then. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks. Wow, that was